Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Blake Kirsch. I'm a third-generation realtor here in the upstate of South Carolina, specializing in both residential and commercial sales all the way from Gaffney, South Carolina to Lake Keowee. If you don't know where you want to live here in the upstate, please take the quiz in my description below. That'll help you understand what neighborhoods, what areas to focus on when we begin our search together for your new home here in South Carolina. In today's video, we're going to be talking about living on land, buying land here in the upstate of South Carolina, custom home construction, and what areas have land available for you to purchase. So stick with me today, and we're going to be walking through and breaking down everything that you need to know when you want to buy a piece of land and build a house here in the upstate. First and foremost, there are definitely options for you to move here to the upstate of South Carolina, purchase a piece of property, and build your own custom home. I will say that it's becoming increasingly difficult to find a good piece of land and a builder willing to build on it within a price point that fits most people's budgets. 15-20 years ago, of course, there were areas like Bowling Springs, Inman, Greer that had tons and tons of land available for people to purchase and build their own custom homes. In today's world, there's very few pieces of land close to Spartanburg and Greenville that haven't been bought and developed, but there are some available. Many times when you're searching for land, it's not always as easy as it is to just search for a home on Zillow. Of course, there are land listings online and different websites like land.com or local websites like netcalfland.com where you can find land listings. Even for me, it can be difficult to look at those because very often the land that's being marketed isn't the same marketing level that most realtors, or at least I, do for homes. They don't have very good pictures, they might not have an updated plat, they might not have an updated survey. So it definitely takes a good realtor to kind of dig through the mess to help you find pieces of land to go look at. You always kind of have to be on the lookout. Sometimes you'll drive past a piece of property that has a sign grown up around it, land for sale, and you don't know if that land was already sold 10 years ago or if it's currently for sale. I can usually always either call the realtor or I have ways to directly call the owners if you are interested in a piece of land to either build on, to use recreationally, or to hold. But in general, we have to be a little bit more diligent when we're talking about trying to buy a piece of land here in the upstate. For example, an area that is very hot right now for people who want houses with larger tracts of land or land to build on would be Inman and Campobello. Those are in the northern part of Spartanburg County. They are more rural areas that do still have land available, but are still within a 15-20 minute drive to places like Spartanburg and Bowling Springs. So when we're talking about Campobello, there are lots of different options for land up there, but that is an extremely large part of our state. As well as Greer, which some people think of Greer and they think of downtown Greer, and they don't realize that it reaches from 85 all the way to the north part of the state, all the way from Greenville to Spartanburg. So when you're looking at land online, it's important to also zoom out and look at the place on the map where it's actually located. That can tell you if it's a piece of land that's even in the area worth trying to build a house in, or if it might be a little too far out for your needs. So areas like Inman, Campobello, Chesney, those are all the areas we'll be talking about today that have land available to purchase. When you buy your own piece of land to build on and you're ready to build, the hardest part sometimes can be trying to pick a builder that is able to build on your land and that you can afford to build on your land. Many people do buy land and then hold for many years before they're able to build on it. In today's world, the cost of construction is extremely high, and I'm just going to be real about that. There are not very many clients of mine that are able to afford to buy a piece of land at the premiums that raw land comes at in today's world and afford to build a custom built home on that land. There's a middle ground with some builders. Some builders will let you buy your own piece of land and then choose one of the floor plans that they already have available to build on your land. If you're talking more of a custom built home, there are thresholds that a lot of those builders have set up for themselves that they're only willing to build a home past a certain price point. And many of those price points can be exorbitant, over $1 million. So it just depends on the location and the type of home that you're wanting to buy or the type of home that you're wanting to build as to whether or not you're going to be able to find land and a builder in order to accomplish those goals. There are tons of homes that are resale homes on larger tracts of land, and that can often be a more attainable way to own a home on acreage. For example, Landrum, South Carolina is an extremely beautiful part of our country. It's located only a few minutes from Tryon, North Carolina, and only a little bit north of Inman, South Carolina. There are tons of homes in Landrum that are on 5 acres or more currently for sale. Now, those homes might not be the exact home you're looking for. They might not be perfect. They might need a good bit of updating. But if you look at the grand scheme of things, in today's world, it can often be much more cost effective to buy an existing home and spend $100,000 or $200,000 renovating it that's already on a beautiful piece of property than to try to find a piece of property that's equivalent to that with a pond or a view or a lake view or something like that. Then find a builder willing to build on your piece of property and then being able to afford the cost of construction, which is only going up, up, up. So if we're thinking about finding a home and you're wanting to do a custom built home or you're wanting to live on land, I'm often going to tell those clients, hey, let's take a step back. Let's look at some of the existing homes already on the market on acreage, because for all intents and purposes, they might already be on the best land that there is available here in the upstate. So it behooves us to both look at existing homes, raw land, new construction builders that build on their own pieces of property. There are a myriad of ways to live on acreage here in the upstate. When we're talking about buying a house on larger lots, not 5 to 10 acres, but maybe a half an acre to 2 acres, there are builders in the more rural areas of the upstate who are already building on larger lots. For example, Meritage Homes has some homes, for example, in Chesney, South Carolina, that are on almost an acre. That is something that might be a good middle ground for you before you are able to purchase a piece of land and build your dream home. There are builders in places like Easley, Piedmont, and Pelzer building large estates over $1 million that are on larger tracts of land that differentiate themselves from smaller builders. For example, there are homes right now in Piedmont, South Carolina on 5 acres, brand new construction homes in brand new construction communities that are very spread out on these large lots. So there are middle grounds already available for us to research. If we're talking about trying to find a home that's closer to Greenville or to Spartanburg on land, we're definitely going to be looking at existing homes that we're either going to have to update or looking at homes that are already updated that are going to be in those higher price points. So land is not always going to be something that's attainable for everybody, but it's always going to be a good investment. Like I always tell my clients, they're not building any more land. They're always going to build more houses, but nobody's building any more land. So every stitch of land that you're able to put under your name is something that's always going to benefit you down the road. For example, if you're looking to buy a large tract of land just as a place for you to use recreationally and on the weekends for fun before maybe you build a house way down the road there are tons of communities across the upstate that still have those opportunities available. Lawrence is a community that comes to mind of somewhere that you can buy 20, 30, 40, even 100 acres at price points that would quite honestly shock people from across the country. There are low price point options for large tracts of land in the more rural areas of South Carolina. That doesn't mean necessarily that it's cost effective right now for you to buy those and build on them, but putting land under contract, putting land in your name, buying land is always going to be something that is going to benefit you in the future. And if you do decide to build there, then great. Then you're able to build maybe down the road or build within the short term on your own land. Or in the very least, you can own it, enjoy it for a time, and hopefully make a profit on it down the road. If you are looking for land in the more rural areas of Lawrence, Clinton, Greenwood, other parts of the western upstate, those can be extremely difficult to pick apart what it is close to. Sometimes I have clients that are moving to South Carolina from different parts of the country. They want to be on land, but they do not want to be an hour away from a grocery store. What that takes is a realtor who has an intimate understanding of all of the small towns across the upstate to make sure that when you're purchasing a piece of land, you're not in danger of a community growing and making the surrounding areas to your rural dream land too grown up or too suburban for your liking, but you're also not having to drive 45 minutes to go to the grocery store. That's when it takes me to help narrow down those areas of where we want to focus on when we're talking about trying to buy a large tract of land. Just last year, I was able to secure a 200-acre piece of property for a client out of Charleston, South Carolina. He wanted to move to the upstate within the next 10 years, but for now, he just wanted to find a good large piece of land anywhere in the upstate, something over 100 acres for him and his boys to be able to hunt on and enjoy while they're still young. And then later on, after he retires or after his kids go off to college, he wants to be able to build on that piece of land. So we had to look at many different things. We had to look at a piece of land that's close to some sort of small community that he's able to commute to for his needs while he's there in the short term. But we also wanted to look at a piece of land that we thought would stay pristine, the surrounding area would stay pristine for his length of ownership in the next 15, 20 years. I pointed him towards Greenwood, South Carolina. Greenwood, South Carolina has everything that you could possibly need when you're talking about moving to a community and wanting all of the conveniences that come with living close to town. So grocery stores, things to do, movie theaters. Greenwood has all of that. But he also wanted to be close enough to Lake Greenwood and close enough to already existing communities that he pretty much knew what was going to be around him in 10, 15 years. So we landed on a piece of property that attaches to Lake Greenwood, so he has not only the beauty and the access to Lake Greenwood, but he also has the land that what he can use recreationally for his own purposes in the next 10 years before he builds. Preemptively, we also have to look at the piece of land that you want to buy, or the piece of land in that case that he wanted to buy, to make sure that you can build on that land. There are not many restrictions or zoning requirements in the outskirts of Greenville County, Spartanburg County, Pickens County. There's lots of options for being able to do whatever you want to do on your own land. I wanted to make sure when he bought this piece of land in Greenwood that he had a perk test to make sure that he was able to put a septic tank on this piece of land because there was no public sewer around anywhere near it. I also wanted to make sure that at least electrical was available on that piece of land because we don't want him to have to pay $80,000 in order to get electrical run to his property. Those are two things that we always take into consideration: the waste disposal system and the electrical system. Then everybody always also wants to know if they're going to have public water or if they're going to have to do a well. If they are going to have to do a well, we might have to get a well inspector out there, or at least a well company, to let us know that this is a good piece of land to be able to do a well on and what that may cost. When you're buying a piece of land, you might not have a house to worry about, you might not have all those inspections to worry about, but you still have to protect your investment and protect your plans for the future by having certain inspections done to make sure that you are going to be able to do with the piece of land what you intend to do. Another thing that I always get asked when people are buying land is, should I have a survey before I buy this piece of land? And that, of course, is going to be situational. If we're buying a piece of land and it's 200 acres and we pretty much know what the plat is and we have a good existing survey, it's not always going to be necessary for you to get an updated survey. If you're going to be building on that property very soon, or you are concerned about access, or you are concerned about the lot lines on a certain part of the property, perhaps on waterfront or perhaps as it relates to a neighbor, you might want to have an inspection done. You might want to have a survey done before we close. Surveys can be very expensive. Surveys can take a very long time to have accomplished, but sometimes in order for us to feel confident about your purchase, we do have to stop, take the time, and have a land survey done before we close. Sometimes, if we are not worried about the investment per se, so say we're buying a piece of land that's 10 acres and it has a really good survey from 15 years ago, we pretty much know where it is, so we're not worried about the investment standpoint, we can go ahead and close on the property. But if you're planning to build and you're building close to one of the lot lines, or you're building close to the water and you need to know where your lot lines are exactly before you put pen to paper with the builder, it may be good to go ahead and get a survey. Maybe not before we close, but sometimes we can set those up before we close, and they might be accomplished after we close. When you buy a house from me or you buy land from me, you are not dropped at the closing table. I'm going to be your real estate source of knowledge and resource for the rest of your life, and at least the rest of the time you live in South Carolina. And when you buy a piece of property, if you need any help getting yourself from land purchase to being able to engage with the builder, that's still somewhere that I definitely can help fit in with you. Even through the building process, happy to help with that. I always want to make sure I'm helping you protect your investment up front, just as if we were buying a new construction house or an existing house in the market. We want to make sure that we have a piece of land that we know just as much about. We know everything about it before we go to the closing table. Another thing to think about when you're buying a large tract of land with a house is how you're going to pay your taxes on that property. Many people, for example, if they buy a house on 30 acres, are going to work to section off the house with 3 to 5 acres and categorize that as their primary residence with the 3 to 5 acres that's taxed at the normal 4% tax rate that everything is in South Carolina when it's your primary residence. The rest of the land they might try to categorize as agricultural land, which has less of a tax liability for the owner. So there are some ways that you can avoid tax liability when you are buying houses on large tracts of land, or when you're building a house on a large tract of land, or when you just own a large tract of land in general. And I know what some of you are thinking. I'll never be able to afford a house out in the country, or I'll never be able to afford a house on land. There's always a way that you'll be able to enjoy the nature and the beauty of the countryside here in South Carolina. A good example is a client of mine that really wanted to live in the country, but his budget was only $250,000. So it was very unlikely that we were going to be able to find him a house with a large amount of land. What we did is we looked more in the rural areas outside of new construction communities or outside of existing neighborhoods for homes more off by themselves in more rural areas. We ended up finding him a home attached to the back of a horse farm that was 1 acre, under $250,000, perfect, renovated, cute little house, but his backyard was a huge horse pasture. We knew that the house was going to stay a horse pasture at least as long as he was going to be there. And as soon as he moved in, he made great friends with the people who own that farm, and he is absolutely in heaven living in Fountain Inn, South Carolina. He doesn't own a large amount of land, but he is able to enjoy it out his back window, and he is able to feel like he lives in the country, feel like he has a large tract of land. So no matter if you are in the $200,000 price range or in the $2 million price range, the countryside and the large tracts of land of South Carolina are definitely something for everyone to enjoy. Whether you are wanting to buy a raw piece of land and build on it, or buy an existing home that is on a large tract of land, we can help you temper your different options, explore the different areas, and help you find the perfect house for you here in the upstate. If you don't know what area that you want to look for land in or want to buy a home in, take the quiz in the description below, and that can help you narrow down what areas here in South Carolina fit your needs best. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you on the next video.